My name is Malisse. I am the founder and CEO of BOBBLE, which is a organic period care company. I'm 35 and I am a new mother of two. So I've just recently given birth 2 weeks ago to my second child. Um, my background in my career has come from a lot of sales. I've been doing a lot of sales and partnerships, more in the technology sector, so SaaS, software as a service, and SaaS platforms. And I've also dabbled in corporate innovation consulting for the last couple of years, which I'm still doing on the side now as well. But right now, very much focused on running my own business. And outside of work, I also sit on the board of advisors for Lean In Malaysia. I think a big part of, and I share this a lot because I think it's important that people can see a journey that someone has gone through. But 4 years ago, when I just gave birth to my first child, my daughter, I was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. So I went through 6 months of chemotherapy and another 6 months of recovery after that. But that was the journey that I felt that I had to go through that helped lead me to the business that I'm running today, and kind of identified a gap that mattered to me, and it was a problem that I wanted to solve. And so that's what inspired me, gave me the motivation, and of course alongside for my family to start BOBBLE. So I studied, I did a double major in international business and e-business. And I graduated from Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand. So my first half of my life, I grew up in New Zealand, and then sort of in high school, I did it in Malaysia. So I ended up going back to New Zealand for my university. And I always knew that I wanted to get into business. I think it is in my blood. My parents and my grandparents' generation have all come from a background of very sort of entrepreneurial ventures. And I've always sort of been exposed to that from my upbringing. So it wasn't something that I said, oh, I want to be my own boss one day, but I knew I wanted to understand how businesses worked. I knew I wanted to work on, whether it's in a company or for myself on a bigger scale. So, bigger than just a single market. And I knew at the time, and bear in mind, this was back in 2003, before you have social media and WhatsApp and all these things, but I knew that technology was going to change the world. Somehow I picked up on that. And so that's why I chose international business, which allowed me to understand how things work on a global scale. And e-business, at the time, it was a very new course. Not many universities offered it, and it helped me to understand, how businesses run online, essentially. So even things like on e-business law, so online law, it was so new. There was not much precedence even. So how we studied it and how we actually did our exam for it is very different to how it's probably being taught today. So I think I was lucky that I kind of knew where I wanted to get into, and I chose the right degree to bolster me, I think, my fundamental understanding to get into that kind of career.
That's really interesting. Would you say that because of your education, that's why it also sort of piqued your interest in the career you're having now?
It definitely helped. Again, I think a lot of really just basic fundamentals that I learned in university. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't remember everything. It's so long ago, but a lot of the basic fundamentals were there. And but I think a lot of the learning just comes from experience, and it comes from the journey, and it comes through a lot of making mistakes along the way. But certainly I think the education side of things has been a great pillar, and especially when you're getting into the workforce, it played an important part, I think, when I had my first job, my first proper real job with a real salary. And that did play a part for me to be a little bit more confident working for a company, because I had some basic understanding.
So I think because you're in the entrepreneur field, right? So I have been watching videos where some people say, oh, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's not necessary for you to go to uni. But some entrepreneurs argue, they say, actually going to uni, it would be good because it helps you like enhance your knowledge about the entrepreneur field and all that. So maybe I want to know your thoughts about this. Like, what advice will you give to young girls out there, especially those who want to be aspiring entrepreneurs regarding education? Will
Yeah.
you want them to pursue it, or yeah, what advice would you basically give them?
I mean, like if you're thinking like, I won't name who, but obviously there's some billionaires in this world who's obviously made it without going to high school or university, but that's like 1 in like 100 million maybe, right? I'm definitely very pro education. The structure and the discipline that you get, it's not just what you learn in terms of the topics and the content, but it's the structure and the discipline that it comes with your learning, as you're learning in university. And now I'm a mother. I have a son and a daughter. If they one day tell me, Mom, I want to be an entrepreneur, I wouldn't hold them back, but I'd still want them to complete their studies as much as possible, right? I think everyone's situation is a little different. If you're able to, and you have access and you have opportunity to complete your university, I definitely would recommend that. And as you're coming out, and if you decide you want to start your own business, I think it's a really hot career choice these last few years that we're seeing people kind of come out of uni and then kind of just go straight into entrepreneurship. I mean, it took me probably more than 10 years before I got to this point, and I had a lot more work experience behind that. I would say one of the first things you need to consider is your risk appetite, especially, for us as women. Every woman has perhaps different goals that they want in life. It's not just career, right? It could be that you'd like to get married and have children at some point. And those factors, especially when you have a child, play a big factor into how you make your decisions and what kind of risks you want to take. So of course, if you're just coming out and obviously you don't have children yet, you have that freedom and that flexibility. But bearing in mind, when you start a business, you're not going to be able to pay yourself immediately. And the reality is that there are a lot of female-founded startups that they're not able to even pay themselves within the first year of operations. So are you able to take that risk? Do you have that kind of financial buffer that's going to buffer you? Let's just say the first year that you're not really paying yourself like a salary. Maybe you pay yourself a bit here and there, but you can't expect 3,000, 4,000 ringgit salary. And B, I would advise also to think about why you want to start that business. Like, what is the purpose behind it? It's not just something that, hey, it's cool, I'm my own boss, I have my own time, but are you solving a real problem? And I think that's what the world needs today, is more and more entrepreneurs, whether you're female or male, it's solving problems that need to be solved. And in that way, you will only truly make a positive impact. So yeah, making sure that you understand your appetite risk, your financial situation, how long are you willing to kind of go without pay? So assessing that kind of situation. And then secondly, your purpose, right? Why you're doing it? What is the problem you're trying to solve? So I think those are two really important things that you need to answer for yourself before you take the deep dive into running your own business.
I think I find it so great that you mentioned finding the problem you want to solve so that you can make a positive impact. I think that really struck me just now, which also brings me to my next question, which I personally am also very interested to know. So you started BOBBLE, which is basically a period product based kind of company. And in a country like Malaysia, where they're a bit conservative and they're not that open, especially where period taboo is so prevalent here. I really want to know what was the basically the inspiration behind starting this company, especially knowing like period taboo is such a big thing here in Malaysia.
And you know what, even though Malaysia is, still considered a developing nation, taboo still exists even in first world countries, in the US and in UK. I mean, it's still prevalent in first world countries. So I think it's sort of everywhere around the world. But basically, as I mentioned, when I had gone through my cancer journey, I actually started to look into what I was using at home, especially I had a newborn at home. And I decided to make a conscious decision to try to use more natural products, especially things that touch your skin. So things like detergents, what we wash our dishes with, laundry detergents, hand soaps, and shampoo, body soaps, things like that. And so I started to switch to more, I started reading more, and I kind of got exposed to more like plant-based, no SLS, those sorts of options. I even moved back to a bar soap. So I don't really buy the plastic bottle stuff. I buy bar soaps now that are usually wrapped in like a paper kind of wrapper. And I then started looking to my period products at the end of my cancer journey, and because I got my period back after I gave birth. And I use tampons and panty liners, and I've been using them for a decade, and it's something that I put in my body. So I was trying to look for a more natural alternative, and at that time, this is again 4 years back, 5 years back, in Malaysia, we didn't really have many natural alternatives which are more organic based, right? Organic cotton based. And we kind of are used to these brands that we kind of grew up with and our moms grew up with. And it's sort of like, we kind of used to using those particular products. I kind of wanted to start to switch my period products. But what I found is that the imported brands that we had available here were either really expensive, and I just don't think it was, sustainable for the average Malaysian female to afford it. And then secondly, we didn't really have much choice. So I started to read more about this space in terms of period care. And I just realized that, for us women, we go through this for the most part of our lives. And I realized how little I actually knew about it, even though I learned about periods in school in New Zealand, being a first world country, but still it was very on the surface. And I remember that the boys were like hustled out of the room, and you segregate the boys and the girls, and learning about this as well. So I kind of decided to think about how I can find or make a product that, it was a problem that I'm trying to solve myself first and foremost, and I'm sure that there are more and more women out there that needed to solve that problem. So I think before I even started BOBBLE, I needed to make sure that I was validating my assumption that there is a market that actually wants to use organic cotton-based products. Because what I found in my research is that organic cotton-based products, free from pesticides, they also have fair wages in their farms as well, just a more sustainable way of producing these products. So that's why I wanted to get into it and start using it for myself. And I have a daughter, so I have to think about also, when she gets her period one day as well, what would I want her to use? So I actually did a survey with about 450 women just to really understand their buying behaviors and their thoughts and what mattered to them when it came to the period care products. And that data and insight actually helped to give me the confidence to start BOBBLE, because then I knew that women actually cared a bit more about this, but just no one talks about it. And also that they were looking for an alternative, not only that it was safer, but something that was a bit more convenient. They didn't mind actually subscribing to a period care subscription. So that's what the BOBBLE business model is modeled on. It's e-commerce based. We offer a subscription service as well, especially we know it's going to happen every month pretty much. And so from there, that's how I got into BOBBLE. And to your question, yes, Malaysia is a country, where I think there are a lot of topics that are considered taboo. But in this topic specifically, I felt that it's something I wanted to champion. And I shouldn't be afraid to kind of go against the grain a little bit and start speaking up about it. And you'll notice sometimes in my language, in the language that we use in the marketing for BOBBLE, we're very inclusive in our language. We don't just say women, we talk about menstruators, because there are also, not all women menstruate and not all menstruators are women. We also try to look at language in terms of saying the word period, like let's just call it as it is, right? Rather than hide behind code words and whatnot. So we talk about periods, we talk about vaginas, you know, we don't want to say the word vajayjay or anything. Again, it's hiding behind this language. So it's language that should be perfectly normal to use. And I think through building this brand and offering a product, I also want to inject the education that should come with this. So menstrual health and well-being is so important for everyone to know about. It's not just us women, but it's men in our lives as well. And we should have that knowledge. You know, we know so much about like the flu and all this sort of stuff, right? Why not know about our periods and our menstrual health? And I think that would empower women a lot more, and we'd feel a little bit more in control about what's going on with our body, and less ashamed about it. So I think it's really about how we can break through what my purpose and my mission through what we're building in BOBBLE is also how can we break through the stigma, how can we rise above the taboos, and how can we start to normalize period talk. And it's not just amongst at home with our husbands or boyfriends, whatever it is, but it could be in the workplace, it could be within our friends, and one day we're going to be mothers, right, to our children, and we've got to be able to be comfortable to talk about that. So it's sort of a lifelong mission, and it's going to be a long journey ahead, but one that myself, not just alone, there are a lot of people now that are coming out and speaking about this in this industry. So, you know, I'm looking for collaborators to actually do this together to make that change together.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think what you shared just now was a very important and very empowering and a powerful message. And I'm actually so glad that you shared what your thoughts about it. And I will make sure the editor include this part in, because I think it's very important for, you know, other girls to hear this, as well as menstruators to hear this and be empowered.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree that I think a lot of people, including me myself, we're not very conscious about the products we use, and we never really read the ingredients. For us, it's, for me at least, it's like, okay, I have a pad, I have to use it because, you know, or else what am I going to use, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think after hearing what you say, I am a bit more aware of what should go inside my body. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And I think, you know, on that note that you say that, I read somewhere that for women, when we are, you know, we do the grocery shop or go to the pharmacy, buy our stuff, our essentials, but buying a period product is one of the least conscious decisions a woman actually makes and she purchases. And so that's interesting. So that's how we want to kind of create that awareness. And I think it's just having ourselves just think about it. Like, if we spend so much money and time reading about what we put on our face, like we care about what we put on our face, what we put on our body and our hair, our makeup, why not for our vagina area, which is actually the most sensitive and most highly absorbent part of a woman's body. So even if you're not a tampon user, you're a pad user, but it's the material that touches your skin. Even if you don't suffer from rashes or allergies or anything like that, it's still, you know, you still want to have a peace of mind when you're using down there.
I think it could also be the taboo as well. So I found out that a lot of my friends, whenever they go out and shop for tampons or like pads, they don't want to linger at that aisle too long. So they just grab whatever it's on like the shelf and just throw it in their cart.
It's the same with condoms, right? Anything sex, reproductive health related, there's still that taboo, especially if there's a guy at the counter. And so, you know, there's a big journey ahead of us and how we want to change that. People aren't shy about it. How can we get men involved in this as well? And that's why also when we offer the convenience factor of a subscription service, it also enables, you know, I think if people are still shy, we could still send it directly to their front door. If I think back, I would say that my first job was actually working at like a global software as a service company. I had a great company culture, was headquartered in the US. So I was actually part of the team, and I worked in their New Zealand, their Australia, their Hong Kong offices, and then I moved back to Malaysia and started the Malaysian operation. So I was with that company for 8 years before I actually went into other things. And that's probably incredibly long for a first job. And if I think back about my time there, I loved it. It was great. But I think there was a lot of unconscious bias that I was absolutely like not aware of. I don't think it was anything directly targeted towards me that I experienced, but there was definitely a sense of a boys' club. And you could see that the men excelled and got promoted faster. And I remember having a conversation with, I was a sales manager at one point for Malaysia, and we talk regionally. So we have offices in the region, and I realized a pattern at one point where all the country managers were all male and typically white in an Asian area. And so I spoke to all the sales managers, which happened to be females at that time. And we made a pact together in terms of how can we rise and how can we Asian females take over as the country managers, because we understand local market, we understand local culture. And I felt like we had to work twice as hard to prove ourselves as men. At the time, I didn't even realize that unconscious bias was a term, and there was a bit of this glass ceiling. So it was sort of indirect, but at the same time, I think I had such a great support system because I realized I was not alone in the company facing this, and we all had the same ambition. So we worked hard together and we supported each other to get to a point where actually all of us at one point, we were promoted to being like local managing directors. It probably took us, 2 years to get to that point. But yeah, that was something that we faced, and we didn't actually realize it. It was just through like working really hard to prove a point, really, that we are able to do it. And it was also bringing evidence. I think what I realized was that we had to show evidence to our male bosses to say like, hey, these are our results. This is the kind of revenue we can bring in. This is how well we can manage a team and develop talent in the company, and why we think we should be the next managing director. And that also includes things like our soft skills. It includes things like our know-how and understanding of local market, local culture, how things worked. And so when you have hard evidence like that, it's harder for them to actually turn away from that and say no. So yeah, I would say that was my personal experience that I had gone through in that company. I think what I see is that, if pre-pandemic times when I'm going to networking events, startup events, or, if you're meeting new people, catching up with old friends, people always ask the question, what do you do, right? What is your job? That's always the first question. And when I explain what I do, I think if anything, it's more people are surprised because no one would ever think of generally going into period care. And, I think there's this maybe a gender bias or assumption that women, if they start a business, it would be something like cosmetics or fashion and whatnot, right? And periods is yeah, for the most part, it is a woman's, it is a woman's experience that she goes through, and it's still part of being a woman, right? So I don't think that should be seen as any different. I think, yeah, people are just a bit more surprised because they don't expect that someone actually choose this as an industry to get into. So if anything, they're more inquiring a bit more, like, what made you get into this? So that's where I do talk about the story with my cancer journey. And I do talk about, the why, because why I share about the cancer story it was that pivotal point, and that helped me to define my why a lot more. And I think that's what's lacking a lot when people are starting businesses is sort of that why. And I think sharing my why with people, hopefully it helps them to inspire them or maybe reevaluate their own whys. I definitely think that there is a responsibility, but not in a bad way. I definitely, I feel like I've been given a second chance at life, and that's why I wanted to make it purposeful. And, not just for my business, but just how I spend my time. And everyone has different prerogatives and ambitions in life. And I think just for me, at least, I wanted to make sure that I do something that can impact women and impact youth. That's always been something that I've been passionate about. And this sort of second chance in life, I wanted to take that responsibility to do that and support women, because I think that, and if I think about it, my daughter one day, she's going to grow up in this world, and what kind of world do we want to, or what kind of environment, at least in our closer community, do I want to leave behind for her? So yeah, I mean, being a woman, I think now is our time. We're seeing so much conversation. We're seeing so much movements that are happening, organizations, like yourselves, that are stepping up. And it's great to see that there are more and more women stepping up. And I definitely want to be part of that change. It's how we can be catalysts for change and doing it together. I think not a single person can do it alone. And that time is now. And I think if anything, it's exciting. And I definitely want to get on that ride and kind of do that with everyone. So I think if anything, things are changing, if not already changed, and that wave of change is going to come even bigger, stronger, and harder. And also more and more men are starting to see that, and they are also jumping on the bandwagon with us. So I think if anything, it's women and men doing things together to make impactful change happen.
What is the toughest part about being a woman in the entrepreneurial field?
Yeah, so I can first start off to say that BOBBLE is fully bootstrapped company, meaning that myself and my husband, we invested in this, and it's just really been on us and our own money. And I think typically you hear of stories of most startups going into fundraising rounds and trying to raise funds and et cetera, right? I've personally been in the startup and ecosystem for the last 6-7 years, and I've seen that pattern happen over and over again. And a lot of the time startups don't actually work out. They actually burn all the cash in the first year, and it's just not a working business model, and then the startup has to shut down. So I wanted to avoid that. So for me, it was very much about, at first we wanted to pilot this, test the market, validate it. So we went through that for 6 months. We sold out our day pads and night pads within the first 6-7 months. So that was a good validation for us. And then we thought, okay, let's start to go into a little bit of fundraising last year, which at the same time was a tough year to fundraise, right? Everyone's risk appetite from an investor standpoint is definitely a little bit lower, but I think it makes it harder as well. Being a female, you're generally faced with males in the fundraising arena, and for them to understand about periods and talk about periods and pads, like, I think it's just a bit of a disconnect there. So it makes it a bit harder. You'd have to educate a little bit more, and I did feel like if I explain that I'm a mother or I am expecting a child, I will be judged that, if you're invested by a big VC company, they want the bottom line. And if they see that you're going to have to take leave for 2 weeks even, right, to go on maternity, that's not very appetizing for them probably. So, there's all these nuances of being a woman that I've seen, and I personally have gone through myself, feel like we have to tiptoe around, especially when it comes to things like fundraising. So that's been one thing. And we're still, we didn't fundraise so hard last year. We still actually managed to keep afloat as a business, which was, I think, a great achievement for us. But now if we were going to move forward and try to fundraise again, which we're going to start looking into, I'm already like thinking of these things in my head that I'm trying not to let I don't want it to be a hindrance or a barrier. So that's sort of the first thing. And I think secondly, it's also about how we juggle our time as a mom. And now I have two, so as a mom of two, and also running a business. And I know that there are plenty of women out there that are doing the same thing, but I think not enough of us are actually speaking up about it and just kind of being there for each other. So I've managed to find 3 other women. They're both running their startups. They both have children. And we kind of come together every few months over a meal, over a chat, and we realize the challenges that we face are so similar, because we always want to be a perfectionist at work. We want to be a perfectionist at home and make sure that our kids are taken care of, that our husbands are okay, and if anyone has elderly that they need to take care of, that's taken care of as well. Not everyone has the privilege of, having help, having a helper or maid at home, right? These sorts of things. So the challenge and the struggle is so real. But, we are still, I think, ambitious enough that and confident enough in ourselves that we want to pursue this career still and still be able to manage things at home. So we're all still learning still, but it's so important to have that support circle so that you don't feel alone doing this, or else you will feel overwhelmed and drowned. And I'm just sort of speaking to maybe the future self of the women that are, or the young girls that might be watching this one day when you have children and you're running your own business or want to start your own business. These are things that you would be facing. And it's not to say it's impossible. It's just kind of figure out how you want to discipline and structure your day-to-day to be able to juggle both. And the reality is that women, we take on both roles a lot more than men who, even if you have male founders, male entrepreneurs, but it's just a little bit different. They can go to work, and I think having children in the front of their mind is not as often as it is for women. So I would say that those are the main 2 challenges, at least I'm facing myself.
So maybe I want to know, is there anyone who really inspired you to be an entrepreneur, or basically who has taken like a bigger role in you becoming like the entrepreneur you are today?
I mean, it's probably, a lot of people would have the answer of, certain role models or, mom and dad. I think my mom and dad a little bit, but they dabbled a lot in entrepreneurship, but it wasn't something that they've fully fledged done. I'm going to say I'm going to give credit to myself. I think I've seen a lot of examples, but at the end of the day, it was going to be up to me to pursue this. And BOBBLE is my 3rd startup. The first 2 startups, I had male partners, all male partners actually, and they failed for different reasons. The first startup failed because it wasn't the right timing for what we were actually bringing to the market. We just couldn't get customer adoption. It was sort of before its time. It wasn't a big enough problem to solve at that time. So that was a big lesson learned. The second startup, I didn't have the right partners, and that was a painful lesson to learn. But what I realized is that from every failure, it's a learning curve in disguise, and it's how you fail forward and actually learn from that. So I actually told myself that if I was to go into another startup, this is post-cancer, I wanted to make sure that I did something that, like I said, had that purpose, was a problem that I'm solving. I had the right partner. All these things I had learned from my previous startups. And so at the end of the day, it's up to me to make certain decisions and take certain risks for myself and work hard and upskill myself and invest in myself enough so that I am prepared to take on this journey. So to answer your question, I think I owe it to me in that sense for doing the hard work and for having the resilience to get through all those challenges. And it's definitely not over yet. I'm sure there's still a lot more to come. Yeah, I'll say I'll give myself a little bit of a pat on the back. And I think not enough women do that. And we need to celebrate the small wins as well. And we need to give ourselves the pat on the back as often as we can. You know, it doesn't have to be once in a blue moon, and we should be celebrating ourselves. We should thank ourselves from time to time. We should be proud. And perhaps we don't do that enough because I admit we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day and our responsibilities and the business and the worries and all these sorts of things. But sometimes if you stop and reflect, and I felt that even preparing to talk to you today, it helped me to stop and reflect a little bit. And this is I love this question that you asked, because I just want to take this as an opportunity to, yes, thank myself and give myself a pat on the back, but also to show to women that it's okay to do that, that it's not shocks and dairy, you know, doing that. And you should be proud of whatever you've accomplished in sort of whatever capacity in different times of your life. Yeah.
I think it's so great that you didn't hesitate to, you know, take your credit. I also agree that a lot of women, they don't really come forward and say, oh, I want to give credit to myself and all that. Me, myself included, because I always feel like whenever I say that, even though I want to say it, but whenever I feel like if I say it, people would think, you know, I'm arrogant, and I'm so scared of people thinking like I'm this arrogant person. But then when I think about it deeper, I feel like my male peers are more likely to also do the same, where they also take their own credit, but people don't think they're arrogant. So yeah, I really like the message you send, how it's very encouraging to girls to, you know, it's okay to, you know, give yourself credit. So that was really a very inspiring message.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, everything that you do, I mean, all your hard work, I mean, it's credit to you. And a particular person can inspire you, yes, but it's up to you to actually take action and make things happen. So, yeah, I mean, all to the power of women and to girls.
We've talked about your struggles and your career. So maybe what do you find most fulfilling in your career?
So far, because it's still early days in this and what I'm doing, I mean, so far, again, I talk about small wins and small victories. For every new customer that we get, and they make that switch to an organic cotton based product, whether it's BOBBLE or otherwise, I do like a little happy dance inside. It's like a little happy dance, like, oh wow, like, you know, this person has actually made that purchase, and we've had a lot of really big purchases as well. And the feedback that we get through our Instagram, from customers as well, like, it's just been so rewarding. And it just brings me back to why I do what I do. And when you're so clear about your purpose, when you're going through rough times, you just remind yourself of that purpose, and it will kind of help you get through that. Your purpose becomes your North Star. It's that guiding light, right? And no matter what tough times you're going to get through, it will help you to kind of maneuver through that. So yeah, I think just every time we have customers who love our products, who are starting to speak up about periods and period products. Like, I see it on their Instagram stories. They'll take a picture of BOBBLE products, or they talk about it. They even talk about why use organic cotton, or hey, this packaging is sustainable, it's biodegradable, and And they're also self-educating themselves through our products. So, you know, helping women to become more aware, helping women to feel more empowered in that sense, feel more at peace with what they're using for their bodies, for their periods. And they're just making that switch. So every time we get a new subscription customer, you know they're getting their BOBBLE stuff every 3 months. It's creating that change and that impact. It's not so much that they purchase us, it's not the money side of things, but it's more that they've made that switch for themselves. You know, I never pushed it down their throat, but they've made that decision for themselves. That's what I think has kind of, you know, makes me love what I do. And that's with every single customer. I can't say that we have like millions of customers or anything just yet, but even that, just that one customer, I'm already doing that little happy dance inside. So it's just making the small impact and that change. with our customers. And then the other part of our work is also we try to do as much giving back to the community as possible. So over the past year and a half, when there's an opportunity for us to support women through sponsoring, like raising funds, or we sponsor BOBBLE products as well for women in sort of low-income areas like B40 communities in Malaysia. Those who are hit by the pandemic, lost their jobs, they can't afford to eat, let alone buy period products, who got affected by the recent floods in Malaysia. So all in all, like BOBBLE, we have actually donated about over 20,000 pads over this past year, and we've helped hundreds of women and their daughters, just making sure that at least they have, I won't just say like a month's supply. For me, it's about the sustainability part. How can they have 3, 4, 5, 6 months at least, just kind of carry them through that tough time of pads, period products for themselves, their daughters. So that also means a lot to me, that it's important that we also give back to the community through the work that we do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So the next question is, I want to know, what does your ideal world look like for a working woman?
That would be a world where women aren't judged for what they say, how they say it, that there shouldn't be unconscious biases anymore. I mean, if the world had no Lean in Malaysia, no girl up, none of all this, that means this is not a problem that we're trying to solve, right? So hopefully it should be a world where we don't have all these movements that need to be there to kind of create this change. So where it is a much more it is a more equal world across all types of genders, right? Not just male and female. I think we have to recognize everyone. And also a world where, okay, if something was, maybe crossed the line, it should be called out on. People aren't afraid. People are learning to speak up. They're learning to call out, unconscious biases. It's so easy, I think, to have a lot of unconscious bias. And I think sometimes it's, it should be okay for people to like point certain things out without feeling like they are being judged or they're being like nitpicky about stuff. And I think at the same time, I just want it to be a world where we want both our daughters and our sons to know that they're both treated equally. So it's not just about women, it's not just about men, it's sort of men and women kind of together. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of, I think, what we're all working towards, and hopefully, we don't need to have organizations like yours and mine to kind of drive sort of these changes.
So last question, what are some lessons or advice you would share with, other women or girls out there?
Just in general?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think first thing is loving yourself and making sure you're pleasing yourself first. I think in this new day and age, it's so easy to try to please other people and be perceived in a certain way. And we sometimes might lose ourselves or our identity in the process because we're trying to be someone else. There's a lot of imposter syndrome out there. I think a lot of people are caught up in imposter syndrome and we don't even realize. I'll admit, like, I've gone through that a lot over the last years and kind of self-doubt and thinking, oh, am I really that? And, I've experienced my own sort of levels of imposter syndrome. So first and foremost, it shouldn't be about everyone else. It's just sort of a lot of noise going on around us. Focus on yourself. And again, right, go back to your whys, your purposes, and everyone will have different reasons for making certain decisions and different reasons for their own purposes and their whys. And that's okay. Like, don't feel like that's judged. Don't feel like you have to be an advocate for something in particular. If you truly believe in something that you want to do, something that you want to pursue, who you want to be, then that should be your decision. And that should make you happy, not make someone else happy. So, yeah, I would say that that's sort of my main advice, because I think it's so easy to lose ourselves amongst the noise of everything these days.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Malisse, for coming to this interview, making time today on a Friday to do this interview so much. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and I hope everybody who's watching this video is inspired by Malisse very wise words. So if you can check out BOBBLE. There are this period product based company, and they're really great. They offer, they even offer sustainable period products. So do check them out if you can. So yeah, thank you, Malisse, so much for joining this interview and for sharing, your experience with us. Thank you so much.